And hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Unfocus.
Hey guys, finally back after just 1 week. Hopefully we keep it that way.
Yeah, we're all in or nothing. Either we're out for like 6 months or we're back the next week. So
Yeah, that's so that means we better keep the weekly schedule because once we drop off, we're just done. So yeah, actually, in a way, that like what we just said right now is kind of relevant to my topic. I don't know if you want me to bring it up right now or if you have any other preamble.
no, I got no preambling today. So let's get right
Okay.
into the topic.
Okay, so it actually kind of popped up in my mind like just a few days ago, maybe last Thursday. Yeah, I think that's when it came up. It's nothing that like well thought out or like organized in my mind, but it's just like a kind of notion, which is like I guess you could say a kind of a realization that I had. And I still haven't like fully like, decided like exactly how I feel about it or how it would even like impact my life going forward or like the way I do things. To just I don't know. I think it's an interesting realization. Basically, I used to believe in the idea that like even when it comes to things that you enjoy doing, that you have to like schedule proper time to do them and then like make sure that you are like, like fully, I guess, like ready at that time. Like you're not tired, you don't feel like you have something else that important that you need to be doing, all that, so that you can fully enjoy it, right? And I still kind of believe that like if there's something you enjoy, you should try to enjoy it as much as you can and like make the conditions so that you can enjoy it. Like grab your popcorn, grab your blanket before you watch a movie, that kind of thing, right? But like just yeah, so last Thursday I'd been putting something off for a while for exactly the reason that like I felt like okay, right now is not the right time to work on it. Yeah, I want to do it, but like I have this other stuff that I gotta do first, or I'm just not like in the right mood or something like that. But then I was like, okay, I've been putting it off for so long, and also I had some kind of deadline associated with this coming up because I want to submit it for something, a contest basically. And so one day I was just like, okay, I'm fed up with putting it off for too long. Okay, let me just try doing it for a bit, right? So I just jump on my laptop, start working on it. I didn't work on it for that long, maybe like for an hour before I went to do something else. But like when I was working on it, I'm like, even though I wasn't necessarily in the mood at the beginning, like once I started working on it, like very quickly, I just like almost like forgot about other things, and just like kind of got into the mood. And so I guess the takeaway was kind of like if there's something that you really enjoy and you enjoy it, then just doing the thing itself is often enough to put you in the mood to do the thing, you know?
Okay, so that's your main like, I guess, argument or takeaway.
Yeah. But like I still haven't like concretely turned it into like some kind of action point, if that makes sense, or some kind of actual philosophy going forward. And somehow I still feel kind of uneasy about it, maybe because I've been going through like forever kind of or like for a long time having that feeling of like no, you need to like schedule it properly, and then if you're not really in the mood, don't do it now. Find a time when you really are in the mood, that kind of thing. So like I'm just kind of curious like how it'll play out going forward and like what like how I really do feel about this, or also like getting your input for that matter, right?
So is this includes stuff that you want to do, like I guess hobbies and projects, or is it broader than that?
I would say like when I had that realization last week, it was mostly confined to things that you enjoy doing, right? Like hobbies, basically. Um, it honestly it kind of applies to other things as well. Like I'll be honest, there have been times when like I had actual work to do, and the work itself, it wasn't anything fun, you know, and objectively, not objectively, but according to me, like it was kind of dull. And yet, it's like when I put it off, it would seem like the worst thing in the world. Like, oh no, I definitely don't want to touch that. I want to put that off for as long as possible. I can't like bring myself to do it. But once I finally force myself, like, okay, there's a deadline coming up, or I got to do something, and then I actually start working on it. Sometimes I'd find like, you know what, it's not that bad. I can get through it. Put on a good like soundtrack in the background, and like I can do it. So it's like, yeah. But like the realization I had was like I apply that mostly to the case where you do want to do the thing, but you're telling yourself that you need to be in a certain mindset to do the thing.
Right, right. Yeah, I can relate to this a lot, especially over this summer,
Okay.
because there's been stuff that I've wanted to like work on or learn, and the approach I have tried to take is to set up like a schedule for this stuff. Like
Yeah.
set up some kind of weekly schedule where I dedicate a block of time during the day to that thing, and then
Yeah.
I don't really think about it the rest of the time. Sure, if I have the energy and I've got like the time to kill, I'll kind of do it on an unscheduled basis on top of the time blocks where I've scheduled it. But
Yeah.
like the idea is that during the time blocks, I'm there, like whether I want to or not, and I do this thing or I learn that thing.
Right.
Um, it hasn't worked out at all, like zero. I
Right.
haven't been able to carry this thing on throughout the summer, and I don't like. I've been thinking about this a bit recently too, and I think it's something to do with like just managing your energy or your passion for a project or an interest. Like
Hmm.
with me, I have bouts where I'm very interested in something, and then right after that, I have a crash phase where I don't really care about the thing. I'm not that interested. I'm not that motivated to work on something. But like the broad interest remains. It's just that in the moment,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
like, nah, I really don't want. I can't be bothered to do this thing, right?
Right.
And I don't know, like I feel like scheduling now, like looking back, I have my Google Calendar opened up right now and I'm just looking at my schedule that I tried to set up for myself. Looking back,
Yeah.
I feel like such a rigid plan doesn't work for like self-initialized things.
Right. It's yeah, that's the thing. It's like okay, I feel like so on the one hand, like the reason that like a rigid plan like that doesn't work, or like for a lot of us, is because we're talking about things where, sometimes you're really you feel that passion to do them and other times not as much. But on the other hand, there's also the flip side of what I said was kind of like sometimes you think you're not in the mood, but you are in the mood. And I think like what you said about like, you have that bout of like passion for the thing and then you have that like kind of crash phase where you don't really feel like doing it at all. I feel like so first of all, I think there's kind of a spectrum there, right? Like obviously, like with most things, there's a spectrum. It's not like one or the other. And like obviously when you have the passion to do it, and if there's nothing else blocking you right then, you do it. And if you really don't feel like doing it at all, like for example, I think the best case I can think of that for myself is like if I do something a lot for a while, then I might feel a little bit sick of it after. It's like while I'm doing it, I can do it, but then once I stop doing it and step away for a while, then I'm like, I've had my fill of that for the day or the week, so I don't really feel like returning to that right now, and that I think is reasonable. But like, I think there's also this like in between phase where it's like you don't feel that like that urge or that drive to do it right then, but you also don't feel like you can't do it. It's more like you feel like maybe I'll be more in the mood a little bit later, or I've got some other stuff, like that kind of thing.
That's what I mean, right?
Um,
Like I mentioned,
right.
the broad interest still remains, but at the moment you
Yeah,
just
yeah.
feel like you can't be bothered to do the thing.
Right. So I think so. The role of like scheduling time for something in this, I think it's an interesting kind of thing because it can work it can work well or not well depending on how you do it. I think think of well, okay, meta, but that's right. Like we have a scheduled time for it every week, and we try to make that time. And often I'm not like before like going into the podcast, I feel like oh I'm a bit tired or like there's other stuff hanging on my mind. Will I be able to like kind of like do it and enjoy it? But then usually I find that once I start talking, it's like I'm in the mood to talk, you know, and like I kind of forget about the other stuff for a moment. So like, but maybe okay, that doesn't apply to everything, right? With creative things, it's not like you need to do it at a certain time with someone else and stuff. But like, I guess what I'm trying to say, scheduling can work. I think there's definitely some kind of sweet spot here, I guess. Like you can't be too conservative about when you schedule, like, oh, I need to find the perfect time. But you also can't be too liberal about it either, because if you say, let me just smack some time and say, yeah, I'll definitely do it then, and that's like an awful time, then you're not gonna end up doing it then, right? So, like,
Here's
what
the
do you think
thing.
about like, yeah,
Yeah, so this is what I think. Um, there are certain things, there are certain times where like you feel very inspired to do something, right? So just sit
Yeah.
down and type or, write or whatever. Um, and I feel like when those moments hit, like you kind of it's good to capitalize on them if you have
Right.
if you don't have any other preoccupation at the same time, of course. So I'll give you an
Yeah.
example. Again, go back to photography, just like last week. Sometimes there have been instances recently, actually, where I've just felt an urge to like open up a photo and to start editing. And then when I've done that, I've just been so like in the zone. I've like had that flow state as people talk about, and I produce something that I'm really proud of, right? But then I
Right.
imagine if I schedule something like that in, I'm like, and I was like, yes, every week, every 2 weeks, I'm going to like sit down from on Sunday from like 9 a.m. to like 11, and I'm gonna edit this photo. The energy might not align, like the sense of motivation might not align with that time. So there are certain things
Yeah.
where it's more of like a fleeting feeling, right? It kind of hits you, and
Yeah.
then you want to capture it, right? You want to use it. And there are certain things where it's like they're not as dependent on that fleeting sense of inspiration. Like this podcast, for example. Like I don't, you and I don't just kind of get up one day and really, yeah, you know what? I'm feeling like recording this podcast. Let's do it right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's more like, yeah, Wednesday rolls around, and even actually like before I start recording, I'm like, this thing again. I have to record this, right?
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
felt like such a
Exactly.
hassle. But then once you're in
Right.
it, you get into the zone pretty quickly, and you're just talking, and things around you just kind of melt for a bit. They kind of freeze. Opposite,
Yeah.
opposite analogies, but yeah. Um, and I think with the podcast, there's an element of like accountability involved because there's two people
Yeah.
involved, right? Like if I don't show up while you're waiting on Riverside, then I'm like, I feel guilty about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. I think, yeah, with something like go on.
Yeah, but then with an individual thing, like I think that's where you have to balance out the scheduling versus spontaneity a little more,
Right.
right? So for example, with if you're what's another aside from photography, there's what's another like, creative thing you can do? Like say you're writing, so you're like a writer and you push out some kind of post every I don't know every week or something.
Yeah.
I think if you were to go on the route of sitting down every Monday to write the thing, your quality might not stay as consistent because with a
Right.
creative pursuit like writing, you have again like that kind of energy maxima, like you've got this maximum point of energy or inspiration, and then if that doesn't align with the time you want to write, then you won't produce something that good, or you just won't be productive in that session. At the same
Yeah.
time, you can't
Yeah.
you can't really work in a way where you just sit down or do something else, and the moment inspiration strikes, you're ready to write. And
Right.
yeah, I'm having a
Uh,
hard time like figuring out like the sweet spot with this too.
yeah. So, okay, so I'll respond to the various things you said. So first of all, like with something like the podcast, I guess, yeah, the fact that it's two people, like two of us, means that it kind of needs to be scheduled. It's hard to do something that unscheduled. It doesn't end up happening. You're free, I'm busy. I'm free, you're busy, that kind of thing. So it makes sense to schedule it. And it's also the kind of thing which is like when we sit down to do it, we don't sit down for too long, ideally, right? And so it's like it's kind of justifiable to like, okay, say just, get up, sit down, record, all that. I said get up and sit down. You get the point. Yeah, like just record and then, like once you start, it works out and stuff. And it's kind of easy to swallow once you start doing it and then you put something out there, right? Whereas like the kinds of things we're talking about where it's like an individual thing, first of all, you're not constrained by like having to schedule it to match someone else's schedule. That's one good thing. And also like that also means that like if you want to spend a bunch of time on it, you can, like you can just one day not have planned to work on something at all and then spend 3 hours on it. Like if you're relatively free that day, hardly without thinking about it. And what you said about Like, like you can't, it's not like you can, at the moment inspiration strikes that you can work on something. Okay, yeah, that's true. You can't just like do it right away. You might be caught up with something else important at that moment or whatever. But I think it's still possible to kind of approximate that. So what I mean is like, for example, if you try to schedule things, and by things I mean like actual like either commitments or formal things that need to be scheduled somewhere in the week, a class, a meeting, or whatever. If you try to schedule those things, or even like time for studying, if you try to schedule those things in a way which is relatively balanced, so that every day you have at least some wiggle room that is not committed to some specific thing, so that like maybe you're sitting in class, you're bored, you're doodling, and you're like, oh, this would make a really nice drawing, and then later that day you can draw it. That's still closer to like doing something in the moment than like saying, oh, I had a good idea for drawing, and then waiting a few days and being like, maybe I should draw that now. I don't feel like it, right?
So
So
I'm gonna interject here, cause
yeah.
so what I meant when I said you can't just do the thing when inspiration strikes, I meant it more like from a point of view of if you want to like grow this thing or kind of make it a consistent habit,
Oh,
right? Because
yeah.
you
Okay.
can't
Okay. I
just
see what you
sit
mean. Yeah.
around until you feel like doing something, right? Like you still have to push yourself beyond the boundary, beyond the feeling, and then just like
Yeah.
this podcast, right? Once you start it, it kind of the ball gets rolling and it gets easier to
Right.
continue.
S- So I think like if I look at the some of the things that I enjoy doing personally, like they happen in like very different ways, or like the way that I want to do them is very different from like between different activities. So like an example of something where I only do it if I feel like it. Like I never like schedule it in or anything like that. I only do it if I feel like it. Is sometimes I like code up a game, like an HTML game or something like that. And like it's never like I say like, okay, I want to spend an hour every week coding up some game or something like that. It's like I'll go like months without doing anything, and then one day I'll have some inspiration, and then one day I'll not only have the inspiration, but I'll be like, I just feel like doing it, and then I'll be compelled to like whip out my laptop and say, okay, let's see, can I get this thing working? Try running it, it doesn't work, start debugging and like really get into the zone of that. So that's the kind of thing where like I think it would actually be better not to schedule that in on a regular basis. It would actually kind of like be counterproductive at that point. It's better to let it be like free flowing, even if that means that it's like really inconsistent, and also the amount that I put out is or produce is like really small. It doesn't have to be small, but like for me it is, and like I don't mind that. So I guess you have to ask yourself, like, with this thing you're doing, is it the kind of thing where like you're okay with just doing it very occasionally and not much, but like when you do it and you sit down for a while, you do it, you have fun? Or is it the kind of thing that you want to be putting out on a consistent basis? And if it's something that you want to, not putting out, you know what I mean, like producing. And if it's something you want to be producing on a consistent basis, then why? That's also an important question, because I have things like that too, right? That I want to do on a consistent basis. That's kind of what I was referring to when I was saying last Thursday I had the inspiration. Like, but it's important to understand like why do we want that?
Yeah, I think so. While you were talking, I started thinking about this. From the things that I've tried to schedule and do while feeling at that, I think there's sometimes like a sense of guilt involved in doing something, and I felt that guilt when I've tried to like do it in the moment or do it like according to schedule. And I mean
Hmm.
specifically like creative stuff, right? Whether it's writing
Yeah,
or
yeah.
photography, filmmaking, whatever. Yeah, like do you get that sense of guilt when you're trying to do something like, oh, I could use my time for something better, even though it's something that you really like, that something that really interests you.
So, okay. So when you say for something better, do you mean like something that's more important in the moment right then, or something that like, because better can be interpreted in a moral sense, or it can be like from a practical sense. You know what I mean? It can be like, oh, I should be working on my homework, or it can be like, oh, I should be like volunteering
I
or something.
think both.
Uh,
Like, yeah, I think both. I kind
oh,
of
okay.
I experience both. Like, yeah, there'll always be some kind of workload that I need to get done, right? Um,
Yeah.
and when I think about doing something in my time that's just like out of pure interest, my mind will often go to that workload, or that kind of thing that I have to deliver, right? And then that's
Yeah.
like the practical side. Then also, yeah, on the other, I guess you described it as moral side.
Yeah.
Like, I also think like, okay, I'm dedicating time to this. Could it be used better by doing X, Y, or Z? And
Right.
yeah, the thing is with the kind of stuff that I want to do, like you could make a case, and certainly like a rational case, like this is the way I rationalize it in my head. Like it's something that I like to do, and it's also something that could be a benefit in the future, right? But then it's just
Yeah.
that feeling in the moment, like of guilt, right? That
Okay.
kind of that kind of stops me as I try to initiate it.
So I think the moral one is very interesting. It's not definitely not one that I uh, came into this thinking about, but it's still worth touching on a little bit. And the practical one too. I guess I can kind of deal with both of them at once, but using like a more like using a very general framework, which is kind of something that I've discussed with you before. I think not on the podcast directly though. Interestingly, uh, like the idea of priorities, right? And like that's something that I'm still like maybe I don't know if struggling is the right word, but like trying to like think hard about like what do I really care about? What is really important to me? What is the like kind of arrangement of things, or like this much time on this thing, that much time on that thing. Like what's the way of splitting up my time that I can, in a sense, feel the least amount of regret or guilt or whatever, you know? And so that arrangement of time is going to include some time for me just to do things that I enjoy, regardless of if those things, benefit anyone else in any way or not, right? I'm never going to say like, oh, I should spend every hour of my life that's not spent working to survive. I should spend every hour of that or every second of that doing something altruistic, right? That's not reasonable to expect. But also, like, yeah, I want to spend some time doing something which I feel like has some positive benefit on people. So like that's something that like needs to be like thought about carefully, I think, at some point in your life or like points in your life, right? Like I'm willing to spend this much time on this thing, and I think that's reasonable, and I won't feel guilty about spending that much time, right? You might still feel guilty about the timing. That's something that needs to be worked out, but at least about that much time spent on it, like that's something like you need to figure out like what's the in some sense the most amount of time I can spend doing this per week and feel like it's still worthwhile and that I can be doing something better with my time. It'll be subjective, but it's something that like I think everyone needs to like kind of like do that exercise with themselves.
Hmm. Yeah, I should also mention that I think in my case, there's also an element of like, so because I'm in, I just graduated from undergrad, but because I'm, in my timeline, I'm trying to get into some kind of professional school or graduate school, and often like the admission committees for those schools, they ask for like extracurriculars, and they want
Yeah,
like a complete picture of you, right? There's also an element of like me thinking, okay, is this thing I'm doing out of pure interest? Um, is there something better I could do to like build up my portfolio or my case for like X, Y, and Z
right.
school? I think that's a major like factor, which I think about it, but I don't like vocalize it as much until now, at least.
Right.
And
I think
yeah, yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
it's like yeah, it's definitely tough sometimes, right? To like figure out like how much time can I spend on this? How much time can I justify spending on this thing, this hobby or whatever that I want to do? Um, but it's like, okay, so in that case, I guess what I'd suggest, and even for myself or just people in general, is probably like if you like don't commit to too much of that hobby at once, if that makes sense. Or like either like commit to like if you want to commit at all, that is, but like if you commit, then like commit to a small amount of time per week, for example, and like you may end up doing a lot more than that. But like if you don't commit to too much, then you won't feel bad if you like kind of fall back on the smaller or the lower amount of time, right? Yeah, no, I think that I think at one point I said either do this or that. No, I think that is kind of like the important thing because I think the issue is if we set like like things keep changing in our lives, right? Like at some point we might feel like yeah, I have like a bunch of time to work on this kind of thing that I enjoy doing, and then the conditions change and you feel like you should be doing something else, but like no, but I should also be doing this thing I want, and then you're kind of torn up between them. But like if you take that time to say like okay, um, like what's like a reasonable amount of time that will keep moving this thing forward, but that's not so much that I'll feel like I'll you don't want to be in a position where like if you do one thing and not the other, you feel guilty, and do the other thing and not the first one, then you also feel guilty, right? Like that's just
Yeah,
then you just set yourself up for failure, I guess, right? So it's probably better to like under-assign the amount of time you spend on each thing at first, and then figure out how to split up the middle ground, then over-assign and try to figure out how to like peel each thing back to prevent that conflict, right?
Yeah. I guess there's also the factor of whether consistency at smaller levels of intensity is better, or whether like less consistency at like greater levels of intensity is better for like learning and producing stuff. Because I was
Yeah.
watching a video like recently, and somebody was talking the creator was talking about this. They've had trouble with trying to make things consistent and
Yeah.
doing that thing at like, for example, 20 30% 30% intensity. But then
Right.
when they do something like kind of on a whim, or at least in an unscheduled manner, they often do it at like near 100% intensity, like they're really focusing on it, and then
Yeah.
they kind of do the equivalent of 100 hours of work at 20% intensity in like maybe 12 hours or something like that.
Right. Wait, 100% 20, or you could say like
The
20
math won't
hours at
check out.
100% intensity.
Yeah, the math won't check out.
Yeah, I get what you
It's
mean.
like,
Exactly. Like
yeah.
less time but higher intensity, so you end up doing the same amount. Exactly. Um, yeah, no, so I think there's definitely, that's why I said at one point, right? Like if you tell yourself that you want to be consistent at something, you should ask yourself why, right? And I kind of have an answer to that question for myself. I was kind of like thinking about it while we were talking. So I gave the example of a thing where I don't care like at all about consistency, and I want to keep it that way, like forever, which is like writing little HTML games and stuff, right? Like I just do those whenever I feel like it, and so when I'm doing it, it's because I feel like it, right? And it's like there's never a time when I'm like, oh, I didn't write a game this month. Damn, I guess I have to write one. Like no, it's like I feel like it, and like I have a good idea, and just write one up, that kind of thing. It can be something like really dumb, but like I'll just do it, just for fun. And then there's other things which like, and so it's a weird idea, the idea of like having to schedule in something that you enjoy. But I think like with me, it's like okay, so maybe I'll be a bit more specific. I've definitely mentioned my math blog on the podcast before, so I'm not afraid to mention it again, right? With something like that, it's like there's like two layers to it, and one layer is like very much the spontaneous kind of thing, and the other layer, or like the other kind of activity involved with doing that, is very much the kind of thing where like you have to kind of decide to sit down, right? And the thing that's spontaneous is like coming up with ideas. Like I'll just be like doing something else and then an idea will pop in my head. And then if I'm not like super busy at the moment, I'm not like talking to someone, the idea will just like kind of ruminate in the back of my mind. I'll like just think, oh, let's see where this leads and like try to do some calculations in my head, that kind of thing, right? That kind of thing is not the kind of thing that could ever be scheduled, right? It's not like I can sit down and be like, think, come up with an idea. Like, no, it's not going to work. But then the part of actually sitting down and writing something, like literally just something as simple as having to like pull my laptop out and open stuff, that is a small barrier that I have to get over, right? Like I'm comfortable in my bed scrolling on my phone. Then I have to tell myself, okay, put your phone away, get a laptop. If I'm a bit tired, I'll tell myself, oh, I'm tired. Do I feel like doing actual work, typing something, keeping my eyes open, that kind of thing. That's the kind of thing where I feel like it's like if I try to only do it when I feel it, then I'm like when I really feel it, then I'm barely doing it at all. Whereas if I schedule it in, then it's like, and there's also the fact that like the ideas I have are always way ahead of what I've written, and I want to write them down, right? So there's this reason to want to do something on a consistent basis, right? It's like the ideas are not something I care about generating on a consistent basis. They just come when they come. Some days I'll have like multiple, some days I'll have none. But it's like the writing down stuff, right? Something that's more like concrete, tangible, something that other people can see the output of. Often that's the kind of thing that I find is like you kind of have to sit down to do it. But that's still the tough thing of figuring out like do you schedule it, do you not, like how. Right? So
Yeah, I think there's a yeah, there's the idea side, like there's the kind of the generation side, and there's the execution side, if that makes sense. Because with ideas, I've tried coming up with ideas on the spot, but good ideas really don't happen in that way. They often happen when you're
yeah,
working on something else, or you're just kind of you're doing anything but like generating the idea. It'll come to your mind, often while watching or reading something else.
Yeah.
And then yeah, like the execution side of it is something where I think you can better schedule that stuff. Like you can say, yeah, I want to work on this. Um, and
Yeah.
yeah, like the execution comes from the idea. Once you have the idea, like you said, it's concrete enough for you to have a reason to sit down and like do the thing from from one time to another for like 3 hours or something.
Yeah.
Um, but in terms of, so what do you optimize for when you try to do this kind of stuff? Like just for when you're doing things that you enjoy, like you're literally just, I'd say like for example the math blog. Are you doing it
Yeah.
just for the sake, or just for the feeling of enjoyment? Of course you are, but like, is that one of the only things, or is there also like a level of, hey, I want to produce like good work out of this?
So
Whether or
yeah.
not
So
I
there's
like, do you do it for enjoyment whether or not you produce like really good work, or is there like that kind of endpoint where you're like, I want to get this piece to a certain level of quality?
like yeah. So that's the thing. Like I'll always enjoy it. That's for sure. There's always that enjoyment aspect. But there's also the fact that, like, if I'm publishing it, it can't be like some notes I scribbled in my notebook where like it's just cryptic and no one can understand, right? Like I have to write in a way that like I explicitly say everything that's in my head, and not just that, but I say it in a way that's clear, or that like there's a logical progression and stuff, and there's an art to that too. And the funny thing is I enjoy that part as well, but it's like, I think I kind of know what it is. I think that the issue with like okay, with the spontaneous stuff, it's like you don't schedule them in. They just kind of pop up in your mind. And it's like if you're free, you just think about them. And even if you're not free, sometimes you still think about them. Like you're supposed to be working, but then like a thought just pops in your mind, and like you're like, I need to settle this. I need to figure this out, right? And then you feel compelled. You might even feel a bit guilty in the moment, but like you'll like it's just in your mind. So it's like it's super easy to just like go down the garden path or whatever, right? Whereas with something like actually pulling something out to write something, to produce something, it's like I'm actively making a decision to do something right now, which, I could be spending that time doing something else, right? Like physically doing, like moving my hands and stuff. So I think the thing you said about quality matters too, but I think that's more if it's the case where it's like, okay, you don't actually enjoy the fact that you have to make this high quality so you can put it out. Then you should really ask yourself like, okay, what proportion in some sense of my work do I want to be like producing it to make a good quality, and what proportion do I want to just be like me, like putting my thoughts out there, like doing what I feel like, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
like I'm saying, even in the case where you actually enjoy the part of like making it like good quality, something that you could put out there and all that, even then, like actually sitting down, like pulling open a laptop, typing, that kind of thing, it feels like it's solid work somehow. It's not just in your head at that point, and it's like you could be spending that time doing something else. Now I have like one kind of like idea I came up with recently for like a better way to schedule things. I can say that now unless you have any comments right now.
No, let's hear it.
Okay. So I know I said like at the very beginning of the episode that like okay, yeah, sometimes you're not really in the mood, but you just start doing it and you get into the mood. But at the same time, I do think there's some like there's okay, so there's times when you like literally cannot do the thing, right? Like you have like you're doing something else in the moment, or like you have an assignment due in 3 hours, and you have to finish the assignment. So okay, that makes sense. And then there's other times when it's like you can do the thing, but you're just worried that it might like crunch other things a little bit, if that makes sense, right? Like there's something else that you want to do today, one way or another, and if you do this thing that you enjoy right now, then like you have less time to do the other thing within, or you're worried you might sleep a bit later or something like that. You get the idea. Um, but I think in a way, like this idea of like, oh, get your important work done first so that you can do the things you enjoy. Sometimes that's kind of backwards because then you don't even end up doing your important work efficiently. You just drag it on. You don't really want to do it, maybe, that kind of thing. Whereas if you're like, okay, I don't know, let's say you have an assignment due Sunday night, and right now it's Saturday morning, and you know the assignment will take a good few hours of work to do, but it's like boring as hell, right? And there's this thing that you want to do for fun, like rather than saying, okay, I'll only do the thing I enjoy after I finish my assignment. Oh, now I have some motivation to finish the assignment, so I do the thing I enjoy, and then you drag your assignment to the last minute. It's probably better just to say on Saturday morning, like, you know what, no, let me just do the thing I enjoy, do that, get out of the way, and then the time pressure to finish the assignment will naturally make me sit down to do that, right? So it's like it sounds kind of backwards, but I'm saying sometimes it's actually good to procrastinate on things you don't really want to do so that they don't like hold you hostage. I don't know. It's like this might also be risky advice, so it's like it's something I really need to think about carefully and figure out. But
I don't really agree with that. Like I've tried that. Maybe it'll work for some
okay,
people. Maybe it's kind of like maybe it just depends on the individual. For me, okay, there's also something like about me which I've learned like not so recently, but yeah, like relatively recently within the past year. It's that like I've got I've got this kind of this weird kind of like I don't know. Oh, it's not a weird habit, but it's just like if I don't do something in the morning, right? If I don't do something like I guess productive in the morning,
oh,
then
okay,
the rest of my day kind of derails, and I
I
really
see.
need to lay. I really need to nail the morning, and then the rest of the day I won't feel guilty if I didn't do something. Like I'll have like I like to schedule my rest time later in the day, right? Or my time for like just general interest stuff later in the day. So if
Okay,
I have like an assignment due, or okay, you know what? Better example, real life example. I was studying for an exam last summer, right? And the exam was in August last year.
yeah,
And the way I scheduled my studying for that was I made sure I did it all in the morning, from the morning till like early afternoon. So I'd start studying sometime around like 7 a.m. usually. And then, well, not always, like sometimes, a lot of times I would actually start studying at like 9 or 9:30. But the point was
yeah,
I had like this morning phase where I'm just studying and practicing. And then as soon as like I forgot the time. I think I set it to like 2 or 3 p.m. As soon as that time hit, I was done. Like I clocked out, I stopped studying, and then I could do whatever I wanted. Like that really
right,
worked for me. Like I had this period in the morning where I had done the thing, and then as soon as the time was done, I just didn't have that sense of guilt or that sense of like something lurking in my mind. I could just guilt-free enjoy doing other stuff. And I
right,
think it depends on the person. Like
yeah,
from talking with you, you often like do things later in the day, sometimes at night. Like
yeah, yeah,
sometimes I'll like call you and you'll be like, "Yeah, I'm working on this thing for like work," and it's like 10 p.m. I'm like, "Why are you
yeah,
doing this at 10 p.m.?" But it depends on the
yeah,
person,
right.
right? So I don't know. Like for me, it's the opposite of what you said.
So I'll admit, with those times when I'm working at 10 p.m., it's never because I actually want to be working at 10 p.m. It's because I wanted to work earlier in the day and I just didn't end up doing it, right? But it's like it's not like imagine having like a 4 p.m. to 12 p.m. schedule. It sounds for work. It sounds really weird, but like imagine that, right? Now that's the thing, right? Like when I even when I suggested that idea of like doing the things you sometimes doing the things you enjoy first and then doing the thing that like you need to do like the important stuff or whatever. Um, like I admitted that it sounds kind of reckless, and in some cases it probably is kind of reckless, right? And it's hard to like just expel that guilt from your mind, I guess, right? But it's
Yeah.
like I think there's still a kind of balance here. Like I think okay, probably the most ideal thing is if you have conditions which really allow you to sit down and focus on doing the important stuff you need to do for work or school or whatever, even if it's boring, like that, let you chug through it. And I'm not talking about like, oh, you motivate yourself or something. Like, no, you set up the environment in a way which really helps because motivation is like it comes and goes, right? You can't rely on it as like an infinite resource. So it's like if you can set that kind of environment up, then that's great. And you kind of did that last summer, right? Like there are a lot of days when me and you would be like working at the same place. Like you come to my house, I go to your house, that kind of thing, which really helped, right? Um, and that's ideal because then you're free by a certain time. Like you've kind of swallowed the bitter medicine of doing your work or studying, and then you're free and you do whatever you want, right? And it just feels so great, right? But I feel
Yeah, and I
like in
think
the
it
case,
actually made the process more enjoyable too, because I struck that balance of
yeah, yeah,
work to like play or work to just rest. And
right,
also the work itself became interesting because the environment and like the context in which it was done was more interesting and enjoyable. Like
true,
we effectively had like a co-working setup, you, I, and
yeah,
occasionally like one of our friends. we just like go somewhere either to each other's house or I think maybe a couple times like somewhere else. And yeah, like we'd just be surrounded by, well, in the case of like each other's house, like we'd sit outside, right? Like in the backyard, we
Yeah,
just have
yeah,
like birds chirping in the background, or
exactly.
otherwise, like we just had like a
It's
lot of
just
sunlight while we were working, which also helps. And yeah, like the
right.
environment was set up for it pretty well.
Yeah. So I think what I would say, and I'll actually kind of say this as like I don't have much more to say on this, and we're kind of reaching 45 minutes. So just kind of like okay, it's interesting because like you came up with one kind of perspective, I came up with a different perspective. I'm trying to like reconcile the two to like see which one works in what case, right? So like you just explained how yeah, like when the environment is good, like we kind of agree, right? Like when the environment is set up to let you like do your important work first and get that over with, so you can just be free and relax and do what you want after. That's like pretty ideal. Um, and then I guess I'm thinking of like if you're in the case where the environment is not fully set up like that, and if you find yourself like constantly stumbling, it's like okay, yeah, today I'll get all my important work done from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. or 4 p.m. or whenever, and you constantly find yourself like you work maybe the first 3 hours or like you're late to start working, and then once you start working, you work for a bit, and then you get off early, and then you're like, damn, by like 4 p.m. I only did like 50% of my work or that kind of thing, and the other 50% of the time was just kind of wasted, like just doing like I don't know, like useless stuff to just fill your time and avoid working. If you find yourself constantly that routine or schedule, it may be worth like being honest with yourself and saying, okay, rather than expecting myself to just like chug away at this boring work from this time to this time for this like long period of time, I'll schedule in something that I enjoy like really early in the day or something like that, finish that, and then work, and then at least I'll feel like I had accomplished something that I enjoyed. Yes, it means I'll be working later, but at least I did something I enjoyed early on, right? So like I think it's like the exact like approach you take depends on yourself, depends on your circumstances, stuff like that. It's still something I'm trying to like experiment with, figure out. But
I
yeah,
do have
that's
another point of
sure,
disagreement,
yeah,
but I know you're trying to reconcile the two. I think with deadlines, it for me it often doesn't work if I try to like enjoy something or do something enjoyable beforehand, because while I'm doing that thing that I enjoy, I'm also thinking about the deadline, so it just takes away
right.
from the from the experience, right?
So I think or like early on when I said like sometimes like I almost forget about everything else. Yes, in the back of my mind the deadline is still there for the other stuff I have to do, but like in the moment I'm just having fun. And so it's like and I'm not talking about the kind of fun where you're just trying to procrastinate. I'm talking about the kind of fun where you're doing something because it's inherently fun, right? You just enjoy doing it. And it's like it is like like there's almost like a science of like guilt management or like expectation management or something. And it's like, yeah, it'll work differently for different people, but like I'm trying to figure out like what is the way to set things up that I do what I enjoy and I don't feel guilty about it or I minimize the guilt. Maybe you can't eliminate it, maybe you can minimize it, right? So yeah,
Yeah,
it's
I think expectation management is like the real key. Like if you set up your expectations right and you set up your boundaries related to things in the proper manner. Going back to my exam last year, like I set up the boundary, which was like past 3 p.m. I would not open a single textbook. Like I completely
yeah,
closed all windows on my laptop, just shut it off and start doing something else. Um, I think setting up an expectation, and of course, like for some things you can't really do that, but at least like where you can, you do it. That really helps because then I feel that you are more motivated to actually do the work too. Like say
right,
for
right.
example, you're finished up with your work for the day. It's like 3 p.m. and then later in the day, like you're thinking about tomorrow. You're not thinking about
Yeah,
tomorrow like when you think of tomorrow, like the work tomorrow, you're not thinking about the work taking up the whole day. You're thinking of the work as like the first portion of your day. Like, yes, I'm gonna work
yeah,
on this thing from this time to that time. After that, I know that I've put this boundary up, and I'm not gonna continue past that time. So
yeah,
you also do. I feel that you do better work during that limited time frame because you know
true.
the outcome at the end. You know the payoff at the end, which is like, yes, you get to do other stuff. And then
So
also the stuff afterwards gets more enjoyable too because you don't have that
yeah, yeah.
guilt.
Yeah, ultimately the idea of like confining yourself to doing your like important productive work or whatever institutional work within a certain time, like we definitely agree on that. I think the disagreement, if you can even call it that, is kind of like when that should be. And so I actually no, I think we both agree that if you can do that earlier rather than later, that's always better. And I think what I was saying was like there may be some cases or some people who can manage to do that later and not feel guilt when they're doing something else that they enjoy earlier because it's like well planned from the beginning, or they had that expectation early on, right? Like so they it's a kind of like you can permute things in different ways, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that key point of trying to like confine something within a certain time rather than letting it spiral out of control is important. And I'll kind of just hint at something else that I thought of recently too. Not that I'll talk about it in depth right now. It might be, I don't know, might make for a good topic for a separate discussion. Is I'm not gonna say it explicitly, but just the kind of like the idea of it is like I've been thinking of like things which make dull work more enjoyable. I mean, obviously we kind of touched on that in the sense of yeah, like if you sit in your backyard, for example, like the physical environment or things like that. But there's another like kind of important ingredient I think that I realized, at least for myself, over this past year. But yeah, so I guess stay tuned if you want to hear about that.
Yeah, and I will say this. I think generally doing something enjoyable that doesn't take much time in the morning is before you do your work is
Yeah, yeah.
actually important. So I do agree
Right,
with you on
okay.
that.
Yeah.
I think where I disagree is like when you basically set up like you set it up so that you're doing like your main enjoyable thing at the beginning and then you do your work later. That's what I,
Right, right.
from
Yeah.
personal experience, wouldn't be able to do. But even when
Right.
I was like, for example, studying for that exam, going back to it, I, in the mornings, I would generally chill out. Like I would read a book or I'd go out for like a run or something, like in a very early morning, right? And then I'd like,
Yeah.
after that, I'd sit down, do my studying.
Yeah, exactly. Still doing a little bit in the morning is always ideal. As for like doing it a lot, like I'll be honest, I haven't really experimented with that yet. I might try it a little bit and like let you know how it goes. It could either be like, yeah, no, you're right, this is not work, or it could be like it works really well for me, and then I don't know, maybe our listeners can like be in one of two camps or something.
Yeah. Okay, I think we'll wrap it up. But
Yeah, yeah.
speaking of routines, there's one author I think I was listening to like some interview at one point, and he writes like fantasy novels. I think I'm forgetting his name, but he has like a very strange routine. Like he'll go to sleep at like 8 a.m. and wake up at like 3 p.m. and then like do some kind
Whoa.
of work. Well, he'll hang out with his like kids like once
Yeah,
they
yeah.
come back from school like at 3 p.m. And then once they go to bed, in the around like 9 p.m. or something, then he'll sit down, like I don't know, with his wife or just like chill out a bit, or with his friends, and then after that, once everybody's asleep, he'll start
Yeah.
working at like
Okay.
1 a.m. or something.
So he has like
And
pure
during like the
focus, no distractions.
yeah, he
Right.
has pure focus. Like there's not a sound around him. It's just him and his books from
Yeah.
like midnight to like 6 a.m. or something.
Right. That's so interesting. Yeah. I guess like it kind of goes to show that there are like routines which seem like downright like pathological or something like that to most people. Like but then for some people they just work well. And hey, if it works, it works. So
Yeah,
yeah, everyone has their own
goes to
cup of
show
tea, I guess.
how much like variety there is.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
wouldn't be
It's
able to
very
do that.
interesting.
I'd just I'd stop functioning like after the third day or something.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I know. It's like I've had bad sleep for the last few days. It is not fun staying up that late.
Yeah. All
Okay.
right, shall we call
So
it?
I think that was a fairly
All
good,
right.
fairly comprehensive discussion.
Yeah, there's
All
more to
right,
discuss,
guys.
but we'll call it
Yeah,
for
yeah.
now.
And I hinted at some stuff in it. Exactly. All right.
Mm.
Can I say talk to you later to the audience? Does that make sense? I guess so, right?
Dude,
I feel they were here with us.
nobody's saying anything. Do
Nobody's
what
the
you wanna
judge?
do.
Okay.
Nobody's the judge.
Yeah. All right. Talk to you guys later. Bye.
Talk to you guys later too. Peace.